The night was cold enough to sting my bones. I walked up the porch steps, my keys in hand, expecting to step into the house I had built nail by nail, brick by brick. But when I tried the lock, it didn't turn. I frowned, tried again. Nothing. Then the door creaked open just an inch, and there he was, Brandon. My son-in-law, with that smug grin plastered across his face. He didn't even bother to hide the contempt in his voice when he said the words that cut deeper than any blade. "This isn't your home anymore." Behind him I saw my daughter, my Natalie. The little girl I once carried on my shoulders through county fairs and fireworks shows. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Her arms were crossed, her gaze fixed on the floor as if ashamed but too weak to speak. That silence hurt worse than Brandon's sneer. The door shut. Just like that. And me? I slept in my truck that night, the same truck I'd driven home from decades of hard labor. The same truck that had carried groceries, tools, Christmas trees. Now it carried only me, a father discarded like garbage. As I lay there, staring at the roof of that old pickup, I felt something inside me break. A man spends a lifetime building, sacrificing, providing, and in a single night, his own blood turns him into a stranger. But I'll tell you this, I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I didn't pound on that locked door. Because men like me, we don't panic when the world turns cold. We let the pain sit, let it sharpen, until it becomes something else. Something stronger. So here's my question to you. What would you do if your own child threw you out of the very home you built with your bare hands? Let me know in the comments. I'll be reading them. And before I tell you how I answered that question, hit that subscribe button and tell me where you're watching from. Because this isn't just a story about betrayal. It's about what happens when the people who try to erase you realize you can't be erased at all. Before I tell you how I fought back, I need you to understand what this house, what Maplewood, meant to me. Because to me it wasn't just four walls and a roof. It was my life, my legacy. My blood turned into brick and wood. I spent 42 years swinging a hammer, mixing concrete, and climbing scaffolds. 42 years in the biting cold of Ohio winters and the blistering heat of summer job sites. My hands are cracked and scarred, my knees ache every time I climb stairs, my back stiffens when I rise from a chair. But every ounce of pain was worth it when I stepped through that front door. I remember the day I first laid eyes on Maplewood. The paint was peeling, the shutters hung crooked, the floors sagged under your feet. Most men would have walked away. But I saw something else. I saw a place where my daughter could grow up safe. I saw a home where laughter would echo louder than the storms outside. And so I worked. Nights, weekends, overtime shifts. Every extra dollar went into Maplewood. And slowly I transformed it. The kitchen where Natalie learned to bake cookies at 10 years old, flour on her cheeks, giggling as she showed me her crooked little stars. The staircase where she came thundering down in her pajamas every Christmas morning, eyes wide, shrieking at the sight of presents. The front yard where she threw her graduation cap into the sky, shouting with the kind of joy only youth knows. Each nail I hammered was a promise. Each wall I painted was a prayer. I wasn't just building a house, I was building memories. And when Natalie grew, when she married, when she brought Brandon into our lives, I thought, maybe Maplewood would become a sanctuary for them too. I thought it would carry her into the next generation. But I was wrong. Because now all those memories, the birthdays, the laughter, the family dinners, were being erased piece by piece. First, my recliner disappeared from the living room, replaced by something Brandon thought looked better. Then a family photo vanished from the hallway, swapped out with one of just Natalie and him, smiling like they owned the place. Even the garage, where my tools once lined the walls like old friends, was empty to make space for his shiny new truck. Do you understand? They weren't just pushing me out of the house. They were erasing me from my own story. But here's where the plot thickens. One night, long before they locked me out, I overheard Brandon. He didn't know I was standing at the top of the stairs. I'll never forget his words. Your dad's stuck in the past. He's holding on to this place like it's his kingdom. But soon enough, it'll be ours completely. Ours. That word again. Like I was already dead. Natalie didn't argue. She didn't defend me. She just sat there quiet. And in that silence, I heard the sound of the first crack in the foundation, not of the house but of my family. And yet, They underestimated me. Because here's the truth, age doesn't make you weak. It makes you patient. It makes you calculating. 40 years in construction taught me something no one else in that house understood. You can tear down a wall in seconds, but building one, really building one, takes time, skill, and grit. And I was about to show them just how dangerous an old man could be when he's got nothing left to lose. They thought age made me weak. They forgot it made me dangerous. If you've ever been underestimated because of your age, this part will hit you hard. Stick with me. Because the war for Maplewood had only just begun. A man doesn't lose his place in the world in one single moment. No, it happens slowly. Piece by piece. Like a wall being chipped away until nothing is left but dust. That's how Brandon did it. That's how my own daughter helped him. Started with something small. One afternoon, I was walking down the hallway where family photos lined the walls. For years, those frames had told our story. There was Natalie on her first day of kindergarten, holding her little backpack, missing her front teeth. There was the Christmas photo where we wore ugly sweaters, her head tucked under my chin, both of us laughing. There was her prom night, standing at the bottom of the stairs in a dress I could barely afford, but I had paid for anyway because she deserved to feel like a princess. But one by one, they vanished. In their place hung new photos. Glossy ones. Natalie and Brandon, arms around each other, smiling like they were the king and queen of Maplewood. Photos where I didn't exist. I remember standing there, staring at the empty nail holes where my memories used to hang. My fingers twitched, wanting to rip those frames down, to demand an explanation. But when I looked at my daughter, she only smiled softly and said, "Dad, it's our house now. Time for new memories." Our house. The word hit me like a hammer to the chest. I swallowed my anger. Because how do you argue with your own child when all you want is to keep her close? But it didn't stop there. One evening, I came home from my card game at the VFW. I walked into the living room and froze. My recliner, the chair that had molded to my shape after 20 years, the place where I napped after long shifts, where I held Natalie on my lap when thunderstorms scared her as a child, was gone. In its place sat a sleek, modern couch. Too clean. Too sharp. A couch chosen by a man who never worked a day in his life with his hands. I asked Natalie where my chair had gone. She didn't even look up from her magazine. She just said, "Brandon thought it was too old. We needed something new." We needed. My chest burned, but I stayed quiet. Silence. That became my shield. My humiliation buried under a calm nod, my pain hidden in the way I clenched my fists until my nails dug into my palms. But the worst came when I stepped into the garage. For decades that garage had been mine. My sanctuary. The walls lined with shelves, each tool in its place. Hammers polished from years of use, wrenches that had built and fixed everything from porch steps to bike chains, saws that cut the boards of Maplewood itself. But now, empty. Cleared out. The smell of sawdust replaced by the stench of motor oil. My shelves stripped bare, my tools packed into boxes and shoved into a corner. And in the center of the garage sat Brandon's new truck. Shiny. Expensive. Gleaming like a trophy. I stood there for a long time, staring at the reflection of my tired, wrinkled face in that polished metal. It was like looking at a stranger. Like I didn't belong there anymore. That was when the whispers began. Whenever I walked into the room, conversation stopped. Whenever I asked a question, Brandon answered before Natalie could. And when I tried to tell a story, about work, about the past, Brandon would cut me off with a smirk and say, "That was a long time ago, old man. Times have changed." Old man. The way he said it wasn't casual. It was venom. And Natalie? My Natalie? She started echoing him. One evening we were sitting at dinner. Brandon carved the roast, Natalie poured the wine. I reached for the salt, and as I did I said, "In my house we always." But she cut me off. "Dad, it's our house now." Her tone was sharp. Final. I froze. My fork hovered over the plate, my appetite gone. My daughter, the girl I raised, the girl whose scraped knees I bandaged, whose homework I helped finish by lamplight, had just sided with the man who wanted me erased. And in that moment I realized something. She wasn't being manipulated. She wasn't being forced. She had chosen this. Each humiliation piled onto the next. And though my pride screamed at me to fight back, I stayed silent. Because silence is a man's last weapon when the people he loves turn against him. Silence lets you watch. And watching lets you plan. I watched my daughter slip further and further away, her laughter no longer shared with me but reserved for Brandon. I watched the walls of Maplewood close in, pushing me out inch by inch. And I watched as the life I had built with my bare hands was repainted, redesigned, and rewritten without me in it. But they made a mistake. They thought they could erase me quietly. They thought age made me weak. But what they didn't know was this: I had one move left. One move they'd never see coming. People think when you reach your late 60s you stop fighting. They think old men fold, retreat to their recliners and wait for the end. But what they don't understand is that by the time you get to my age, you've survived more storms than most people can imagine. You've lost jobs, buried loved ones, broken bones, watched dreams collapse, and still found a way to stand up again. So when my daughter and her husband tried to erase me from my own home, I didn't panic. I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I planned. The first step was simple: prove the truth. I drove downtown to the Cuyahoga County Recorder's office, the same building where, decades ago, I signed the papers that made Maplewood mine. The place smelled of old paper, dusty carpets, and burnt coffee. The kind of smell that seeps into your clothes. The clerks moved slower than molasses, stamping papers, shuffling files. When it was finally my turn, I leaned on the counter and asked for a copy of the deed to 418 Maplewood Drive. The clerk gave me a bored look, then shuffled away into the back. Minutes later, she slid a folder across the desk. I opened it and there it was. My name. Only my name. Not Natalie. Not Brandon. Not anyone else. Just me. I traced the letters with my finger, steadying myself against the tremor in my hand. They thought they had erased me. They thought I was a ghost in my own home. But here in black ink, the truth stood firm. I was still alive. And that truth gave me power. I tucked the deed under my arm, walked out into the gray Cleveland afternoon, and for the first time in weeks, I felt the weight on my chest ease. But knowing the truth was only the beginning. I needed a plan. That's when I called Carlson. Mr. Carlson was a real estate attorney, sharp as a knife and just as quick. When I walked into his office, he stood up from behind a desk stacked with folders. His handshake was firm, his eyes steady. "Tell me everything," he said. And so I did. I told him how Natalie and Brandon had moved in, how they had pushed me into silence, how they had locked me out of the home I built with my bare hands. When I was done, Carlson leaned back in his leather chair, fingers steepled. "You've got two options," he said. "One, you can evict them. Call the sheriff, change the locks, the whole 9 yards." I sat in silence, picturing it. My daughter's face as deputies escorted her and Brandon out. The shouting. The tears. The hatred that would linger forever. Carlson leaned forward. "Or, you can sell. Quiet. Clean. Final. They'd be out for good and there's nothing they could do about it." The word final hung in the air like smoke. Evicting them meant living with the fallout. Arguments, lawsuits, fights that would drag on until I was too old to care. Selling? Selling was surgical. One cut and the wound was closed forever. I thought of my recliner. Gone. My photos. Gone. My tools, my memories, my voice inside those walls. Erased. And then I thought of Brandon's smug grin, his words echoing in my head. "This isn't your home anymore." I leaned back, my jaw tight. "Sell it?" Carlson smirked. "You're colder than you look." "No, not cold. Just tired of being erased." The plan moved quickly. Carlson made the calls, drew up the paperwork, and lined up a buyer, a developer from out of state. The man wasn't interested in family histories or sentimental value. He wanted land. He wanted to tear down Maplewood and build condos. And for once I didn't mind. Let them watch their kingdom bulldozed into rubble. Let them stand in the dust of the empire they thought they had stolen. For weeks I kept my distance. Stayed in my cheap motel, lived quiet. But sometimes late at night I drove past Maplewood. I'd sit in my truck across the street, watching through the windows. Brandon, feet on my coffee table, beer in hand. Natalie, flipping through home decor magazines, pointing at paint colors like she owned the place. I gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went white. They had no idea the ground beneath them was already shifting. But then, a snag. Carlson called one evening. His voice was tight, uneasy. "We've got a problem." My stomach dropped. "What kind of problem?" "There's a lien on the property. An old one. Filed years ago." I froze. "From who?" Silence stretched across the line. Then he said the name I hadn't heard in nearly 20 years. "Marcus. My brother." The name hit me like a punch to the gut. Memories came flooding back. Fist fights in our father's kitchen after the will was read. Shouting matches in the driveway. Marcus accusing me of tricking our old man into giving me the house while he got stuck with the cabin by the lake. We hadn't spoken since. And now, apparently, he had left his mark on Maplewood in the form of an unresolved lien. Carlson sighed. "We can still push the sale, but Marcus has leverage. If he wants to fight, this could drag out for months." I hung up the phone and sat in the dark motel room, staring at the cracked ceiling. My daughter wanted me erased. My son-in-law wanted my throne. And now my estranged brother, my own blood, had stepped out of the shadows to claim his peace. For a long time I sat in silence. The weight of betrayal pressing down on me heavier than the years on my back. And then, slowly I smiled. Because Marcus thought he had leverage. But what he didn't realize was that he wasn't walking into a family squabble. He was walking into a war. And I had been preparing for war my entire life. The war wasn't just with my daughter anymore. My own blood had joined the fight. "Tell me, would you evict your family and face them every day or cut them off completely by selling the house? What would you choose? Tell me in the comments section. When you've lived long enough, you learn that every house has ghosts. Some you see in the creak of the floorboards or the way a window rattles in the wind. Others hide in paperwork, buried in dusty files, forgotten until someone digs them up. That's what Carlson discovered. One afternoon, I met him at the recorder's office again. The same stale air, the same slow-moving clerks. But this time, Carlson slid a thick folder across the table. His expression was grim. "You should read this," he said. Inside were brittle documents, yellowed with age, stamped with official seals. I scanned the pages and my heart sank. Maplewood hadn't always been mine. In the early 1980s, the house had belonged to a family named Bauer. They'd lost it in a foreclosure so messy it left scars in the legal system. Disputed ownership. Back taxes. A trail of paperwork that never fully closed. Carlson tapped a page. "Your brother used that loophole when he filed his lien. He tied it to the Bowers case. That's why it's still valid." I exhaled slowly, staring at the brittle paper. "So you're telling me, this house was never clean to begin with?" He nodded. "Not entirely. And if Brandon or Natalie ever find out about this, they could use it against you." I laughed, bitter and sharp. "They already think they've beaten me. Imagine if they learned the truth, that maybe it was never mine at all." The thought gnawed at me. For decades, I had told myself Maplewood was my legacy, the proof of all my sacrifices. But what if I'd been fighting for a home that carried someone else's ghosts all along? I left the office that day with the weight of history pressing on my shoulders. And that's when Brandon came for me. It happened outside the diner near my motel. I had just finished my coffee when I saw him leaning against his shiny truck, waiting. His arms crossed, his grin smug as ever. "You really think you can get away with this, old man?" he sneered. I kept walking, but he stepped in front of me, blocking my path. "What exactly am I getting away with?" I asked, my voice steady. "Selling our house out from under us. Natalie told me everything. She says you're losing it. You're clinging to something that doesn't belong to you anymore." I stared hard at him. "Your mistake, son, is thinking anything here ever belonged to you." His jaw tightened. He leaned closer, lowering his voice like he was delivering a threat. "We'll fight you. We'll take you to court if we have to." I smiled, slow and deliberate. "Then you'll be fighting me, and Marcus, and the ghosts of every damn family that came before. You sure you're ready for that?" For the first time, I saw a flicker of doubt in his eyes. He turned sharply, climbed into his truck, and drove off without another word. But the fight wasn't over. Not by a long shot. A few nights later, Carlson called again. His voice was grim, like he was about to deliver a blow I wouldn't see coming. "I pulled something else from the archives," he said. "You're not going to like this." I braced myself. "What now?" "It's Natalie," he said. My chest tightened. "What about her?" "Years ago when she was in college, you co-signed a loan for her tuition. Do you remember?" I did. Of course I did. Back then she was just a teenager with big dreams and I wanted to give her everything. The bank had required collateral, and I put Maplewood on the line. "The loan was paid off years ago," Carlson continued. "But somewhere along the way paperwork was filed attaching her name, however faintly, to the property." I sat in silence, the phone heavy in my hand. "She may not even know it," Carlson said carefully. "But if she ever finds out, she could make a case. Legally, she has a thread connecting her to the house." I felt my throat tighten. My daughter hadn't just betrayed me emotionally. She hadn't just locked me out or erased my photos. There was now a chance, however slim, that she could take Maplewood from me entirely. I pressed a hand against the wall of my motel room, staring at the peeling wallpaper. All those years. All those sacrifices. And now, the very house I had built might legally belong in part to the daughter who had thrown me out. The betrayal cut deeper than Brandon's sneer, deeper than Marcus's lean, deeper than any insult. Because Natalie hadn't just turned her back on me as a daughter. She was now, unknowingly, poised to challenge me as an enemy. I thought back to the nights I carried her on my shoulders at the 4th of July parade, the way she used to grip my hand when thunder shook the windows. She had trusted me to keep her safe. And now I was holding the secret that could destroy her trust forever. That night, as I lay awake listening to the hum of the motel air conditioner, a thought kept circling in my mind. The house isn't mine anymore. It isn't theirs. It isn't even Marcus's. It had become something else entirely. A battlefield. Every memory, every nail, every brick had turned into ammunition. And the fight wasn't just about walls or deeds anymore. It was about betrayal. About ghosts. About bloodlines tearing themselves apart. And I knew this. There was no walking away now. The house wasn't just mine anymore. It had become a battlefield of betrayals and ghosts. The night before the closing, I heard a knock at the thin motel door. At first I thought it was a mistake. Nobody came to see me here. Nobody cared to. But when I opened it, there she was. Natalie. Her hair was tangled from the wind, her eyes red, her shoulders trembling under the cold. For a moment, she wasn't the grown woman who had locked me out of my own home. She was my little girl again, the one who used to curl up beside me on the couch during thunderstorms. "Dad," she whispered, her voice cracking. I kept my face hard. "What are you doing here?" She swallowed, struggling to form the words. "I know about the loan. I know my name is tied to the house." The air in the room grew heavy. Carlson had warned me this day might come, but hearing it from her lips felt like a knife twisting in my gut. "And?" I asked flatly. Her tears spilled over. "Brandon's been pushing me. He wants me to fight you for the deed, to take it completely. But I can't. You're my father." I studied her carefully. I'd been burned once already by her silence, her complicity. I wasn't going to be fooled by crocodile tears. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. Her lips trembled. "Because he's planning something. He wants to challenge the sale in court, drag it out until you're forced to give up. I thought I could erase you quietly, Dad, but he wants to destroy you." Her words cut deeper than any blade. She admitted it. Right there in the doorway. She had tried to erase me, not with violence, not with open cruelty, but with silence. With absence. I turned away, staring at the cracked motel wallpaper. "You broke my heart, Natalie. After everything I gave you. After every nail I hammered into that house for you. And now you show up because your husband's dirtier than you expected." She flinched like I had struck her. "I'm sorry, Dad. I didn't mean for it to go this far." I closed my eyes. The weight of 68 years pressed down on me. Then I spoke the truth I'd carried inside for months. "You already went too far the night you let him lock me out." Her sob was soft, almost childlike, but I didn't turn back. I let her stand there in the cold until finally she left. The next morning was quiet and gray. Snow dusted the Cleveland streets, muffling the sounds of traffic. I walked into the title office with the deed in my hand, my heart steady. Carlson was already there, papers spread neatly across the table. Across from him sat the buyer, a sharp-looking man in a tailored coat, calm and disinterested. To him, Maplewood was just an investment. To me, it was the battlefield where my family had died. I lowered myself into the chair, every joint aching. It was almost over. And then the door swung open. Brandon stormed in, Natalie trailing behind him. His face was red with rage, his eyes blazing. He marched to the table and slammed his fist down, rattling the pens. "This sale isn't happening," he barked. The buyer raised an eyebrow. Carlson didn't even flinch. "Actually," Carlson said smoothly, "it is. The deed is in my client's name. He can sell to whomever he pleases." Brandon sneered, jabbing a finger toward Natalie. "Then we'll challenge it. My wife's name is tied to the property. She has rights." I finally looked at her. She wouldn't meet my gaze. Her eyes stayed fixed on the floor, her silence louder than any words. Carlson cleared his throat. "Technically, yes. But the loan was satisfied years ago. Her claim is tenuous at best. A judge would laugh it out of court." Brandon wasn't finished. He leaned across the table, spittle flying. "And what about Marcus? He has a lien. This whole thing is a fraud." For a moment, the room fell silent. My jaw tightened. The buyer leaned forward, his voice low and unamused. "Do you have any legal standing to stop this sale, sir?" Brandon sputtered, his face reddening. "This is our house." That was my breaking point. I stood slowly, my hands steady despite the ache in my bones. My voice was sharp enough to slice the air. "No. It's my house. I built it. I bled for it. And the two of you treated me like a ghost in my own home. You think you can erase me? You think you can bury me before I'm even gone?" I slammed the signed deed onto the table. "Well, today I bury you." I turned to the buyer. My voice cut like steel. "Sell it?" The buyer grinned. "Done." The pen scratched across the paper, final and absolute. Just like that, Maplewood was no longer ours. Not mine. Not Natalie's. Not Brandon's. The silence that followed was heavier than stone. Brandon stood frozen, rage twisting his face. Natalie's tears streaked silently down her cheeks. Carlson gathered the documents, calm as ever. "Congratulations. The property is no longer yours." I turned to my daughter. My voice softened, but only slightly. "You wanted me gone from that house. Now you've got your wish. Except the house is gone too." Her shoulders shook. Brandon cursed under his breath, storming out the door. She followed slowly, glancing back once, her face a storm of regret. But regret doesn't rebuild burned bridges. Weeks later, I drove past Maplewood one final time. The developer had wasted no time. Bulldozers chewed through the walls, splintering wood, shattering windows. The porch where Natalie once played with chalk was reduced to rubble. The living room where I had watched countless football games was nothing but dust. And as I sat there in my truck, I felt something unexpected. Because the house was gone, but so was the pain. Natalie had tried to erase me. Brandon had tried to humiliate me. Marcus had tried to haunt me. But in the end, I was the one holding the pen, signing the last chapter. I didn't get the family I hoped for. I didn't get the soft landing most men dream of in old age. But I got something else. I got revenge. They thought they erased me. Instead, I erased the home itself. Weeks later, I found myself back on Maplewood Drive. The street looked the same, quiet and lined with bare trees swaying in the winter wind. But the house was gone. Where it had once stood, proud and weathered, there was now only rubble. Piles of splintered wood, shattered glass, bricks reduced to dust. Bulldozers sat idle, their jaws still dripping with the remains of my past. The porch where Natalie used to draw chalk flowers in the summer sun? Flattened. The living room where we had huddled around the TV on snowy nights? Gone. Even the garage, my sanctuary of tools and memories, had been crushed beneath steel claws. I sat in my truck and watched. For a moment, a sharp ache flared in my chest. That house had been my life's work. It had carried every scar of my labor, every echo of my sacrifices. I could almost hear the laughter from old Christmas mornings, smell the roast dinners from long ago Sundays, feel the weight of my daughter as a child asleep on my shoulder. But then the ache eased. Because as I stared at the wreckage, I realized something important. The house was gone, but the humiliation was gone with it. The pain, the betrayal, the slow erasure, they had all been buried under the rubble. For months, Brandon had tried to erase me piece by piece. Natalie had stood by in silence, letting him strip me of my place in the world. Marcus had tried to haunt me from the shadows of paperwork. And yet, in the end, none of them had the final word. I did. I had walked into that title office with my head held high. I had chosen dignity over desperation, respect over begging. I had cut them off clean like a surgeon removing poison from the body. And watching those bulldozers tear down Maplewood, I understood the lesson I needed to share with you. Sometimes, protecting your self-respect means letting go, even of blood ties. It's not easy. The world tells us family is forever. But what good is family if they treat you like a stranger? What good is loyalty if it's a one-way street? At some point, a man has to decide whether he values peace or pain. I chose peace. I drove away from Maplewood that day not as a broken man, but as a free one. The house was gone, yes. The memories had turned to dust. But so had the chains that kept me tied to betrayal. And I'd do it again. Now, I want to hear from you. Was I wrong for selling the house and cutting my family out, or was it justice? Tell me your thoughts in the comments. I'll be reading them. And if this story spoke to you, if you love hearing about betrayal met with cold, calculated justice, you're in the right place. Subscribe to Sweet and Sour Revenge for the next story. Because where betrayal lives, so does payback. She thought she erased me. Instead, I erased the home itself. And now, she's left with nothing but the memory of the father she betrayed.